About to leave, already packing. Come with me, I'm not really asking. We'll get away to a place where we don't know. About to see the world in action, what we can be, life with no distractions. We'll get away, this is what we waited for. Take my hand, we'll make it somehow. We can't miss out. I'm done living life with the lights out. Die with my own doubts. Be free with me. Let's go, let's be free with me. Be free. Not looking back, eyes on the freeway, Bonnie and Clyde, a classic cliche. We're on the run, this is what we waited for. Take my hand, we'll make it somehow. We can't miss out. I'm done living life with the lights out. Die with my own doubts. Be free.
Hello, good evening, everybody, and welcome to our latest live stream, which is on beliefs tonight. Hi, Craig. How are you doing? Oh, you're muted, Craig. You. I haven't done that for ages. Oh, do you not think you're muted? I can't hear you. Can anyone else hear Craig? In the chat window, can someone confirm if they can hear Craig or not? I can't hear Craig. Sorry, anyone? No. All right, we can't hear Craig. Why? I'll try and see if we can work out why we can't hear Craig. It does say you're muted on my end, Craig. It says guest has muted himself. We'll try and sort that out in a second. I'm sure we'll. I'm sure there's something we can do about that. Let's see if I can unmute you. Sorry about this. No, I can't. Don't know why that. Yeah. Oh. No. We'll worry about that in a second. Okay. Might be the headphones. Don't know. According to Mir, it might be the headphones. I can see Craig talking away. We can't hear what he's saying. I don't know. I don't know. We'll try and sort that out in a second. We'll start the PowerPoint in a minute, and then we'll try and sort Craig's sound out. Oh, he's gone. He'll come back in a second. Okay. We will go to the thing, and I'm sure Craig will be with us in a second. Can you hear? Can we hear you, Craig?
I hope so.
Yes, we can. Yes, we can. Hear me now. Right, and it's with perfect timing.
But I don't know what that. Anyway, we're
Perfect
ready.
timing. We are ready. It's perfect timing because we're going to go straight to a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, which Craig's going to.
Hopefully, now that you can hear me, yeah. I think we do this one a lot. So to start off with, so if you've not been with us before, what we do is we ask you inside of 2 minutes to identify 5 of something, 4 of something, 3 of something, 2 of something, 1 of something. Today it is all about beliefs, obviously because paper 2 is next week, and it's on. This is a beliefs live stream. So we want you to identify 5 types of religious organization, 4 functions of religion. Now that can be functionist, Marxist, or feminist functions of religion. 3 social changes that have led to changes in religiosity, and we're going to go a little bit deeper into that in this session. 2 reasons for higher levels of religiosity amongst ethnic minorities. You might think about the work of Steve Bruce there, and 1 sociologist who argued against secularization. So let's start our clock. Oh, people are already coming through with answers to number 5. New religious movements,
5,
NAMs, cults, sects,
4,
denominations.
3,
Yeah, there's one kind of big
2,
one there. New religious movements is like a
1.
big kind of umbrella term, really. There's one more in there. Sects, cults, denominations, churches, NAMs. Excellent. I think pretty much everyone's got that. Hervé Leger for 1. Yep. It would be even more helpful if you could tell us what Hervé Leger said. Denominations. Okay, so Katie's come up with social solidarity, the ISA, alienation, psychological needs. Excellent.
Oh, yeah. Good.
Quite broad range there. Spiritual shopping, yes, that was Hervé Leger. Excellent. Social solidarity, hope and meaning, sense of comfort. Yep. What we sometimes see as being the psychological functions. Anyone mention who the psychological functions are? It would be even better. David talks about the privatization of religion. I'm assuming that's for arguing against secularization. Excellent. Leon, yeah, argues against secularization indeed. Online religion. I'm trying to see where that would fit under.
Might be a social might be a social change.
Okay. Cultural transition, social solidarity, comfort, cultural defence. Okay, excellent, Jada. We might actually use some of those for another answer.
Yeah. Well done for spotting Malinowski. I can't have missed who it was, but someone got Malinowski for the psychological function.
Mahi's
well done.
Said Malinowski there. Weber as well. Yeah. Some people are coming through with the other ones. Malinowski was the psychological function. Owen's coming up with that as well.
Javier said
Durkheim.
Javier's got Grace Davey, believing without belonging, for 1.
Excellent. Nice concept there. Feminism has led to women rejecting
5,
traditional religion, moving towards more
4,
new religious movements. That is
3,
a good point.
2,
Civil religion and
1.
Bella. Yeah, we could argue that in with those functions.
Lily got cultural defence and cultural transition.
Yeah, and Sasha's come up with maintaining identity and culture, collectivist culture, sharing beliefs. Excellent. Some really good points there. Opium of the people for number 2. Certainly opium of people go into the functions of religion, so anaesthetizes individuals so that they don't challenge the status quo. Higher levels of religiosity is due to marginalization. That's a good shout as well.
Yeah.
Excellent. Let's have a look at some of our answers then. So most people got these 5. Cult, sect, New Age movement, church and denomination. Of course, some people put NRMs in there, and sort of usually with NRMs, we tend to bracket those first 3 in there. So cult, sects, New Age movements, even some denominations as well would fall under new religious movements. It's just basically different from the traditional churches. Let's look at 4. I've gone with social solidarity, psychological functions, promoting a value consensus as an ideological tool. There were lots of other ones that came through from a kind of feminist viewpoint. Some people have come up with some of Weberian ideas like the Protestant work ethic and things like that as well. It's really useful to know those, and particularly to know those. Duncan, I know you're going to do an activity on this, whether they side with the idea of whether they side with the idea of religion as being a conservative force or a social change as well. People have said immigration and migration from globalization. Yes, that could. Let's go to number 3. I've gone with all the Asians here. So rationalization, secularization and globalization have all impacted on changes in religiosity by age, gender, ethnicity and social class, which are the 4 kind of big ones that you need to know there.
Absolutely. Some of them would be, easier to link to some of those than others. I saw someone on, I think it was commenting on one of your videos, actually, Craig, someone was saying, they
Really.
wouldn't like a question linking globalization and age and religiosity, which I agree that would be quite hard.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I think where you would go with that is sort of like say that possibly a younger generation would be more likely to engage with new age movements that are increasing because of the process of globalization, or you could talk about how online religion
Yeah.
and people engaging with online religion as a process of the global process of globalization brings along technological change, and therefore people are more likely to go online. So there are a couple
There
of
you
ways you
go.
could do it.
It can be done.
It
It
can
can
be
be done.
done. Again, it would be a difficult one. I would feel a certain amount of empathy if that popped up on the exam. I've gone with cultural defence and cultural transition, two kind of Steve Bruce ideas. Some people have come up with things like clash of civilizations and things like that as well. Yeah,
There was
you have to make
marginalization. Yeah, marginalization
marginalisation
was
as
a good
well.
point. Mm.
You have to link it to sort of like how it would then sort of like impact on the specific group, on a specific group. So things like marginalization you can link into things like the civil rights movement and the Baptist movement, and sort of like how people would gravitate towards those, even sort of like into some sect memberships. So for example, Jim Jones Temple sort of like had a lot of people from marginalized backgrounds joined up, to kind of challenge the status quo. Obviously, they're thinking. Somebody's just put existential security theory is another good one as well, and to talk about with marginalisation, and you can link that. And there is a question about that a little bit later on.
Yeah,
Question number one,
absolutely. Okay. Yeah. Sorry,
and number
last one.
one, I went with the most popular one, Davy, but there were lots of other really good ones in there. Leon, I think who else? Hervey Leisure we had in there as well. Um, Remember that cultural
Oh,
defence doesn't include William Saliba and Gabriel. Arsenal fan there, clearly. Um,
goes right over my head, that one. But
they are centre backs for Arsenal. They're
okay.
playing
And
defence for
so they're
Arsenal.
defence, but
Yeah,
not cultural. Okay. Um,
religious market
yeah.
theory you could say as
Yeah.
well.
As,
You could
as
say
long as you
religious market
establish the
theory.
reasoning. But yeah, you
You
could.
you can talk about Berger as well, so like particularly Berger because he's a really interesting one because he changes his mind later
Yeah.
on. Berger
Yeah.
initially sort of like says, well, I won't say what he says because there is a question, but yeah, the idea of he sort of like says that religious diversity reduces, can kind of, religious diversity has helped the process of secularization, but then later on he sort of like says, well, actually, if you've got more choice, people are more likely to engage with religion.
Great stuff.
Okay.
Also, great as usual for people to be answering each other's questions in the chat window, which is always good to see. Thank you very much for those. If we miss any, it's great that some of you are on it as well. So brilliant. Okay, we've got to categorise now. Now this is about those definitions of religion. If you cast your mind back to the start of beliefs in society, or early on in beliefs in society, probably when you're looking at the different ways sociologists might define religious belief. And we've got substantive definitions, functional definitions, or a social constructionist definition. And then we've got some different ideas, features, things down at the bottom, 8 of them. And we just need to try and put them under whether they're features of a substantive definition, a functional definition, or a social constructionist definition. I think this is quite tricky. If you've revised it, some of them you'll be like right on. Let's see how you do with this one. Okay, here we go.
There's a horrible question on this a few years ago, wasn't there?
There was. Hi, Jesse. So,
There's an interesting comment there from Owen. Would Nation of Islam link to the marginalisation for Black Americans? I could possibly make that link. Definitely make that link with sort of like conversion to Islam as a result of marginalisation, because Nation of Islam grew around kind of the time of the civil rights movement, grew massively.
Yeah.
So yes, you could argue that.
Yeah. Lots of answers coming through. A couple of people not sure what the bit about the Jedi is. Don't worry about that. I'll explain when we link it. Okay. So lots of people. I'm seeing a lot of people getting very much in the right ballpark especially for functional and for substantive. Seeing lots of those there. So, shall we have a look at them and then we'll talk through them? I've seen lots of right answers. Well done. One or two we might need to explain. So here we go. So the ones that link to a substantive definition, as lots of you got, I'm just seeing a few there, like Ella. It must include a supernatural power, yeah, God or something like that, because it's like that's the idea of how you define it. And linked to that, it's something that cannot be explained scientifically. There's a mystery, a supernatural element to it. The functional ones, we're talking about defining religion based around the functions that they perform, and we tend to link it to the sort of functionalist functions, so social cohesion, performing psychological functions. And you could make an argument that something like football in the UK today performs those functions without being substantively a religion. That's the that's the thing there. And you're saying you think the Jedi bit's a Star Wars reference. It is, but but it's more than that. I'll explain it in a second. Yes, Sophie, well done. It was about people saying that they were Jedi on the census. Social constructionist is an interactionist approach where you look at what gets defined as religion, what gets called a religion, and what doesn't. You know, there are lots of beliefs, lots of different beliefs. Some of them get given the label, the status of being religion, and some of them don't. So, for example, lots of people filled in on the census. I can't remember which year it was. It wasn't the last one.
This was 2001, I think, wasn't it?
Was it? Yeah, it was a while ago, wasn't it? That they were Jedi Knights. But even though a lot of people said they were, it didn't become officially categorized as a real religion. Now, why not? Is that based on, it's a social construction of what can be considered religion, what can't. It wasn't officially considered religion by the state. That was the one. Alex is saying, surely Jedi can be functional because it might unite people. Yeah, I mean, in this particular example, I think people were just doing it for a joke, really, weren't they? They were because they weren't. It was like, rather than saying no religion or something like, oh, let's see if enough people put. If enough people put that they were Jedi Knights, it would need to be reported. So it wasn't fulfilling the functions of religion. Obviously, the Jedi belief system in the Star Wars universe might do, but that would be substantive as well, I suppose. Okay,
just to answer a couple of questions there, because they kind of both mean the same thing. In 2022, they asked a question about evaluate issues with defining and measuring religion. And so this was a really quite difficult kind of question that students found. What they did in the end is sort of like, if you answered down the kind of secularization route, and so like answered it as a secularization question, you were kind of being awarded. If you answered down this kind of route, substantive, functional, social constructionist, the problems that we have with defining what is a religion, you would have gained credit. If you did both together, that would have been even better.
And quite a few people went down a sort of more methodological route with kind of how you'd measure levels of religiosity. And that worked as well, but especially again if you could link it. It was a 20 marker, but if you could link it to these, then even better, because obviously methodologically measuring the functional ones and the social constructionist ones would be quite different. Then also there has been a 10 marker with this, and I can't remember. It was the impact of something, probably globalization, on the
definitions of religion.
On definitions of religion, there has been at some point. Was there? Or was it functions? Might have been functions. Anyway, it could come up. It could come up. So just it feels sometimes these kind of definition type ones feel like that's just like an introduction to the topic, and it won't come up in a question. But obviously, it is there, so it could come up in a way. Everyone, let's pray it doesn't. Pineapple had said that's true, but you know about it now, and think if you think about it, you can link these things to something. You could link these, so it's not the worst thing to come up in like an outline and explain or something. Anyway, back to Craig for impacts of secularization.
Thanks, Duncan. Yeah, secularization, it's one of those kind of social changes that has such wide-ranging impacts across this specification that they let's just say it's used quite often, particularly when you're linking to other areas of the specification. This kind of secularization debate. Has society moved into a secular age? Is it just a Western phenomenon, or kind of has religion changed somewhat, and it's not necessarily the same way as we would see it before. There's kind of three real kind of big angles on it. But what we're going to look at here is the impacts of secularization on different sets of religious beliefs. So if we look at the different religious groups that different groups we might be impacted by secularization, and we're going to spin it round and see how might this impact on these groups. So secularization, what impact might that have on religious organizations? So your NRMs, your cults, your sects, New Age movements. How might it impact on age and religiosity? How might it impact on gender and religiosity? How might it impact on social class and religiosity, ethnicity and religiosity, and on religious diversity, the different types of different types of religious organizations we have, which is very kind of, those 2 points on the left-hand side are very similar. So let's give it a spin and see what comes up.
Where's it going to stop?
The
wheel. Oh, I thought it was going to be age then.
Secularization. Okay, so how might secularization impact on gender and religiosity? So a couple of ways you can do this is you can look at the features of secularization, or you can look at the differences in gender and religiosity and work backwards. So you could think about one of the features of secularization and then apply it to either male or female religiosity, and then you could go the other way and sort of like think about some of the trends in religiosity and then apply it backwards. How might the process of secularization? Elrica has come up with New Age movements. That would be a good shout. But how might you link that? I can see it here, but just for the benefits of others. New Age movements. Boys are more likely to be less religious because of hegemonic masculinity. They're more risk taking. Okay, so how can we link that to secularization? Miller and Hoffman, men being more risk averse. That is a good one. I think it's one of the ones I've gone with, to be honest with you, Miller and Hoffman. Secularization affected men more through disenchantment and rationalization, hitting men first. Excellent, Jesse. That is another good shout. So I like this idea, particularly through employment. They are more likely to have undergone the process of rationalization, and therefore they initially would have been less religious than females. Obviously, that's changing now as more women sort of like are involved in employment. Women can be more secular due to patriarchal values from mainstream religions.
Okay, although secularization, that kind of idea of secularization from within, we sometimes talk about the religions becoming kind of less traditional, might be less off-putting to women, I suppose, arguably. But I know that isn't the question. So,
Sam's gone with Woodhead, sort of like obviously we're linking into the kind of Kendall project he does some Woodhead. More women leaving traditional religious organizations as a result of patriarchal views within them, and they may then move on to other religious movements, for example, New Age movements. So excellent. They're pretty much the ways I've gone with. So if you did get a question on sort of like secularization and different levels of gender and religiosity, I've sort of like said that women are more risk averse. Somebody else sort of like put men are less risk averse. Either way, I think you could go with it. And that was the work of Miller and Hoffman, as I forget who it was now, correctly identified. Socialization, the role of socialization, and sort of like how people... socialization through paid employment. This is the process of rationalization and disenchantment. Males were more likely to be socialized into these kind of new secular norms and values and rational thinking and scientific thinking through employment. And that led to them being less likely to be religious earlier on. And then we've seen that in a later way. And the other one that sort of people went with was NAMs, and sort of obviously and female involvement in NAMs as a result of secularization, which is really good as well.
Yeah,
let's spin it again.
I was going to say, in a way, that was like that's an argument to suggest there's been religious change more than secularization, but you'd definitely be able to link it and say that it was the impact of secularization may have also had an impact on these people.
Question there: weren't women always more risk averse? So how has secularization affected that? Okay. Well, if you think about sort of like maybe in the 1940s, 1950s. Males would have been very much socialized into sort of like religious beliefs. And as this started to change, males are more likely to adopt the secular values, whereas women are less likely to adopt secular values at that point. And therefore, males will be kind of ahead in terms of secularization, in moving away from religion. And we see that on the census. and things like that. And over time, it's always been males who are less likely to be religious than females. I hope that helps.
Yeah. Okay, let's see where we're going to.
Let's spin on next one. I may have looked one.
Hope it's not going to be gender again.
I hope not. No, it's age.
Oh, that's a fun one.
I may have just given you a big clue there, actually, when I just went into that. Why does secularization mean more women go into New Age movements? Okay, well, New Age movements often sort of like are associated, particularly with kind of the earth and the ecology. So things like Wicca and pagan religions are very much based on nature, and there is an idea that sort of like women are moving away from these traditional structures that kind of kept them oppressed or kept them in a submissive position to these New Age movements that actually embrace and encourage femininity, and that's why they would go that way. I hope that helps.
Very good. What about age then?
Okay,
Old
Jesse's come
people
up with old people aware of mortality. Okay, so therefore they are they're more likely to be religious. Okay, less parents are passing down religious values. Excellent, Arjun. Religion is not declining in all age groups. For example, the elderly. Oh, sorry, that's just got skipped past there very quickly. The elderly. I've lost it. Yeah. Declining attraction for younger individuals find that religions are just filled with old people. There is certainly a difference in terms of the types of socialization based on whether you're socialized in a secular society or in a more religious society. We are seeing a trend. Very recently, I've seen a few articles popping up about younger people, particularly Gen Z, becoming more involved in religion than previous generations, so your millennials and your Gen Xers. They are more likely to be involved in religious and spiritual activities now. Really, yes, good note to sociology, and particularly we talk about the impact of Sunday schools. Sort of like, many older generations would have gone to Sunday school and things like that as well. Older generations went through lots of big social changes in terms of religion for comfort. Okay, it's a nice explanation. Increase in Sunday schools as younger generation won't go to church. Decrease in Sunday schools as that's pretty much what I was trying to explain there.
Yeah.
And a very good point, which actually highlights this from Mia. But with Islam, there are more younger individuals, 60% are under 25, and that is a good point to make. I mean, I know in an outline and explain question, you wouldn't necessarily have to evaluate, but this idea of intersections, we make these big, broad judgments, but we can actually say, and I would also sort of like say that the Muslim population is generally younger than the population of white British. Is generally younger, but they do have, because of their cultural values, they are more likely to be socialized into religious norms and values than other groups.
Yeah, and that could be a nice bit of analysis. That kind of the extent to which you could bring that in. The extent to which this change has happened, and of course this could come up in an apply and analyze type question as well, couldn't it?
It could do. It could be It could also be a 20 marker. You never know.
Yeah, absolutely. E said cultural amnesia, which is a good term to use. I mean, it's something other people were describing, but it's a good concept to use. The idea that essentially things get forgotten over generations because it stops being passed down, stops being socialized.
Another good point about this from Sophia: household bills. It was kind of gone. Household bills for religious assemblies decreasing in younger schools. So this is really linking into that kind of idea of secularization, that religion is losing its influence inside of social institutions like education, like the family. So I think that's a really useful one as well. Sort of the fact that we've kind of removed some elements of religion from day-to-day schooling.
Yeah, fab. Similar points.
There you go.
Younger people socialised into a secular society. And this idea of cultural amnesia. And, I think it's worth bearing in mind, because secularisation has been going on quite a long time now, that we're probably not just talking about your generation or even our generation as having less religious values. There's got a few generations now of having more secular values, and as Craig was saying, there's some reverse of that. So some secular parents with religious kids,
and also, as we say, those intersections as well. It's we cannot sort of like say that everybody who is a certain age acts the same way.
No, absolutely not. Okay, lots of really good answers there. Well done, guys. So Craig mentioned this before, the question of whether religion acts as a conservative force or indeed whether it could be an engine of social change. This is something which I'm sure you've thought about. We're going to look at the two sides of this argument. So we're going to start with, can you think of some ways, we've put 2 ways, but come up with as many as you want, that religion may act as a conservative force? So you can describe the ways it does it, or you can link me to some concepts or some sociologists who say that it does. Lots of different ways we could go with this. In what ways might religion be seen as a conservative force that prevents social change? Okay, so we've got opium of the people from Dan. Very good. Do you want to explain that a little bit more? But it's a really good point. Religious traditions. Okay, more men in high-ranking roles. So yes, or patriarchal.
Growth of fundamentalism.
Okay, so yeah, that'd be. I mean, that's an interesting one, isn't it? Because fundamentalists, on the one hand, it's conservative. On another hand, it can be for social change, but obviously, it's kind of, arguably regressive social change or conservative social change. Fundamentalism in a secular society is campaigning for social change. So that's an interesting one, which you can, a nice bit of nuance you can have with them. Creating false class consciousness. Very good, Rockstar. Patriarchy.
Yeah, patriarchy. Yeah. There's another one there. So, like, you look at the works of de Beauvoir, maybe Armstrong. I'm trying to think who else talks about patriarchy.
Yeah, quite.
Al-Sadawi. No, Al-Sadawi kind of
does a bit.
She does talk about patriarchy, but it's not necessarily about. She doesn't say religion is patriarchal. She says society is patriarchal, and that embeds
and then that gets reflected in religion. Yeah. We've got Parsons, we've got Lenin, obviously Malinowski. Pretty much all your functionalist, most of your Marxist, and most of your feminists argue this. Obviously, we know that there are some Marxists and neo-Marxists and some feminists who take a different view.
That's a nice phrase. Power of the ruling class. Class inequality cannot be challenged without challenging God.
Yeah, very good point. Yeah. Now, people have already started going on the other side a little bit about changes in religions, then talking about maybe the last pope being a little more liberal than previous ones, and people have started talking about dual character and Weber and things. So shall we do the other side? You're ahead of me anyway, but we had opium of the masses, creating false class consciousness, and establishing a value consensus, causing social cohesion and stability. But all those other ones are great, Malinowski and all that kind of thing. Loads of people coming in with the other side.
I was going to say, it's a really good activity just to kind of sort of like draw up your different theories of religion and put them on one side or the other, and then some in the middle, some that do both. Somebody else has mentioned, Mahi talked about Gramsci's dual character of religion. I think it's a really nice one to kind of end on if you were doing an essay like this.
Yeah. Absolutely. And Engels talks about that as well. Absolutely. Marxists like Bloch. I'm seeing those. There's some liberation theology. Then there's the principle of hope from Bloch. Liberation theology, Engels, Martin Luther King, New Christian Right, Weber, because of the absolutely the spirit of modern capitalism and all that kind of thing. We've got lots and lots of suggestions there. Organic intellectuals, which is very very much Gramsci. We've got what does theodicy of disprivilege mean again? So that's the idea, which might tie in more with the it being a conservative force idea that, and certainly links to social class. The idea that religion based around being disprivileged and perhaps providing answers for suffering, as Sarah put there, very good. But that in that sense, certainly Marxists would argue in doing that, it then acts as an opium of the masses. Or someone had Lenin earlier, spiritual gin or mystical fog. Lots of things there. And the civil rights movement, black clergy. You've really, really good points there. People coming up with some of the kind of religious feminist points as well. Obviously, we normally use feminism on the
lots of good examples
conservative side, but some very good examples of feminists arguing that religion can be part of social change as well. Particularly people like Woodhead and excellent. Okay, so we went with, but you come up with so many more. The idea that it could be a focus of protest and examples of like civil rights movement or liberation theology. And also Weber's idea of Protestantism leading to capitalism.
Lots of good examples kind of come through there. Sort of things like the kind of Baptist movement, Poland's opposition to communism from E. I think there was another one. Sometimes sort of people make. I mean, often they kind of go into that globalization element as well with some. I mean, for example, like Nanda and Hindu nationalism and things like that.
Yeah. And remember, you can use. I know we mentioned that fundamentalism is one that sort of, kind of potentially crosses both sides of the debate, but you can use that there. Someone mentioned New Christian Right in the chat. The Iranian Revolution. There's an awful lot you could talk about on this question.
And they're really useful. Those type of responses are really useful in that secularization debate as well. Sort of like that kind of like resacralization and sort of like the growth of or kind of the revisiting of kind of some traditional religion. So you think about the New Christian Right and things like that, going back to those traditional values.
I've got a couple of Marxism questions in the chat, so I'll just answer those quickly. And then, so what does Engels argue about religion? So Engels said that religion has a dual character. So he had pretty classical, traditional Marxist views. Agreed with Karl Marx for the most part, but he also said that it kind of, people then would have a kind of idea of a better sort of life and a better sort of society and justice and issues about that kind of thing, and caring about the poor and things like that in scripture, and that might lead them to having social change. And
he also talked about
a neo-Marxist. We tend to describe him as a neo-Marxist. He's a kind of humanitarian Marxist, humanist Marxist.
Engels also kind of talked about later on, sort of like how he saw early Christianity as being revolutionary as well, which kind of brings into that social change. So Engels and Gramsci are two really good ones to use for that. If it was a debate, yes, it is, but no, it isn't, or it does both.
Yeah. Okay. Even, I mean, no, don't want to confuse matters there. I was about to say even Marx said the odd positive thing about religion, but he didn't suggest it caused social change. He wasn't as emphatically negative about religion as sometimes people think when he said it was the heart in a heartless world. He was kind of saying that was kind of good thing to have. You kind of want a heart in a heartless world, but in doing so, it acted as this opium of the masses. Okay.
I think when you're talking about, just Sophia said, for an evaluation, can you talk about postmodern perspective? In postmodernism, sort of like when you're looking at that debate, does it cause social change? Doesn't it cause social change? If you went with a postmodern view and says, actually, it serves many purposes for different people. So for some, it could maintain what is happening, but for others, it will be seen as a force for change or a force for hope, or it tends to be more personal with postmodern ideas. So it's more focused on sort of like, enlightenment and sort of like people finding purpose.
I just noticed before we do this, I mean, most people have answered this already and correctly, but someone asked the difference between a sect and a cult. Do you want to take that one for us, Craig?
Okay, I think it's the difference between a sect and a cult, right? The lines blur a lot. What I tend to find is the biggest defining feature is, did it come from a traditional religion? Okay, so does it come from a traditional religion? Now, you may get confused then with denominations. Sects tend to be more world rejecting. They tend to be more insular. They tend to be more isolated. People tend to be more isolated, and they demand more commitment from their members. Cults tend to be about personal improvement, and they are more likely to be seen as being world affirming or world accepting new religious movements. There are different types of cult that we can talk about: audience cult, client cult, and cultic movements, and they have different levels of involvement, and it is more based, I would say, quite controversially, I don't know, it's more based around consumerism cults, if we think about it that way. So people are buying into these ideas.
That's a nice functional definition there. Someone up there asked, which was People's Temple. So People's Temple was a sect. A good example of a cult would be something like Scientology, although there's some debate as to whether it's become more established now. But
Scientology kind of kind of goes through the process of all three different kind of cultic movements. So you can be involved in it in different levels. I don't want to be an advert for Scientology here, by the way, but you can be kind of engaged with it in a quite a low level. Sort of like, just buy the books, read, go to a seminar. Then you can have like the client cult element of it, and then you can have the cultic movement element of it. Client cult, like, you'd have an advisor, a paid advisor, spiritual advisor or something like that. Okay, so which sociologist do we associate with the term sacred canopy? Lots of people have come up with the right answer, which was Peter Berger. I think we've already kind of gone through that. Heaven's Gate is a good sect.
Depends what you mean. Depends what you mean by good.
Yeah,
good example. It's an interesting example.
Yeah. Okay. Question number 2: which sociologist do you associate with the research? Oh, we've got.
I thought I'd changed.
Research.
I thought I'd changed that.
Jesus in Disneyland.
It's gonna correct when I go to the answer, isn't it? I forgot that.
Well, wouldn't a cult need a charismatic leader, and Scientology does not have one? Well, you could argue that Scientology kind of has had them.
Yeah,
but again, the lines blur. The lines blur at certain points.
And we often say as charismatic leader is a characteristic of a sect. Something like People's Temple.
I think that's the point. We're saying Scientology doesn't have a charismatic leader.
No, so it's more like a
Scientology kind of. You look at it; it kind of all came from L. Ron Hubbard and his ideas, and now they've got effectively they have whoever's in charge of Scientology. It's almost like a CEO arrangement now. Yeah. So there is that element of it as well. Yes, most people have got it correct and have gone with Leon.
And now the typo's magically corrected itself when we went to the answer.
Oh, I know.
No, I know why. It's because I edited it on here rather than Anyway, so okay. It's a technical thing. Don't worry about it. Okay.
Spherical Art's kind of answered the question there. So, like somebody was talking about what is Jesus in Disneyland. Spherical Art, that is a very good response. How consumerism and religion is blending. How it's kind of packaged in the same way that kind of Disney will package things. Yeah. Disney will package an experience. You also now have religious experiences. And Leon calls it Jesus in Disneyland because he noticed these kind of traditional kind of values when he was in Disneyland. He sort of noticed the way in which these kind of core Christian values were being put forward.
And they also had like an Easter parade, which obviously Easter's a religious holiday, but they had it in Disneyland with sort of Mickey Mouse and things like that. So there's this kind of idea of religion being disembedded from church and traditional religion and finding itself in a more consumerist type idea. Royal Gamer saying, what is believing without belonging?
They really want to know. They really do want to know.
And Sarah's.
Let's see if we can answer the question. Thank you. Well done, Sarah. Thank you. Saves me answering that one. Lots of people have sort of like kind of put Davey in there. It was Davey talks about believing and not belonging. There you go. Leon, I would say, is in that kind of postmodern idea.
Definitely. Some people say that actually what we see is belonging without believing. That's an interesting debate, isn't it? So believing without belonging, Grace Davies' sort of postmodern type approach as well. It's very much this kind of, we've had religious change rather than secularization type position. And so people do believe in religious ideas, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they belong to a traditional church or an organized religion. And it links with also that concept of vicarious religion. People are happy for others. Yeah, people are happy for others to do religion on their behalf. But some people, people who think that we are seeing a secularization say, actually, it's the opposite. Lots of people who are parts of religions don't really believe in it, and that's an interesting interesting debate. Yeah.
Okay, which sociologist examined the growth of civil religion in the USA? Is it Parsons, Bruce, Berger, or Bella? Excellent. Kind of most people getting this right, saying D. It's kind of coming through on the screen there. And it was D. It was Robert Bella.
Yeah. I was going to say, it's another good one for that functional definition of religion.
Bella, of course. Yeah. Bella kind of linked into that kind of functionalist idea of kind of civil religion and American exceptionalism, and how certain symbols can be almost become bonding. So things like the Statue of Liberty, Fourth of July, apple pie, those kind of American ideas become symbols.
Yeah, and they perform that kind of totem role, if you like, if you link it with kind of Durkheim.
National anthem, somebody's just put through. Yeah, excellent, good one.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of this idea of Americanism and how America are sent to kind of save the world in some ways. Right. Okay. Question number 5. Which sociologists do you associate with existential security theory? Now, lots of people were getting this one right before, so I'm hoping they'll get it right again. We didn't ask the question, but lots of people did talk about who came up with existential security theory. Lots of people some people come up with B, but lots of people coming up with the answer of C, Norris and Engelhardt, and they are correct. Existential theory, security theory, is the idea that the more secure you feel within yourself, the less likely you are to be religious. So this tries to explain the concept of secularization in places like Western Europe and how there is still higher levels of religious belief in places that are suffering, that have insecurity.
It's an interesting one because they use it to explain why America has secularized less than Europe. So even though it's wealthy, they don't have things like a welfare state, and so therefore there is more existential insecurity. So it's not just that it's a poorer country, but that's an interesting.
It is a really, really kind of nice theory to use in that secularization debate to sort of like say, well, there's a reason why we see more Western nations, or sort of like Western European nations, being less religious because they have this existential security, whereas other nations may not have that. They may have conflict, they may have gross inequality, they may not have the basics that we would have in Western Europe, and therefore they look towards religion to provide a certain function for them.
Yeah. They work as quite a nice sort of competing argument with Stark and Bainbridge and the religious market theory as different explanations for those trends, those which countries are secularized and which are not. Okay. That's all our questions. Going to come back to the chat window. I have noted we're going to finish very shortly, but I've just noticed there are some more questions in the chat, so I'm just going to quickly spot some of those.
One there.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's the one. I think that's the one you were going to say. Go on.
Is it that one?
How in depth? Yeah. They're useful as examples, right? They're useful as examples. So if you can't think of a specific example, they're useful for backing up. Say, for example, you're talking about cults and you want to back up kind of, some of the features of a cult. They're useful to back them up. So you wouldn't need to know, you wouldn't need to know, say, for example, Jim Jones Temple. You wouldn't need to know the whole
don't need to
study
tell the story. No, you don't need to tell the story.
You don't need to tell the story, but you need to know that sort of like, say, for example, if you're trying to prove that people joined sects because they were marginalized, then you could sort of like say Jim Jones People's Temple sort of like drew lots of its members from marginalized groups within the US, for example. So that's it's almost like using it. You'd possibly use it in the same way as you might use a research study to kind of back up a point that you're making.
And also, can you guys help with social class and religion? I mean, obviously, there's an awful lot you could say about that, so we're not going to sort of teach it all now. But I think some of the key points that you'd want to do. People earlier were talking about the theodicy of disprivilege and things like that. So traditionally, I mean, from a sort of Marxist point of view, there was this kind of idea that religion was kind of aimed at the working class to perform that function of false class consciousness, and it kind of had a different role for the ruling class, more like networking and social capital and that kind of thing. In terms of like contemporary trends, it's interesting. It's not straightforward. We've historically tended to say working class people have higher levels of religiosity than middle and upper class people. That isn't necessarily still the case. So so there's interesting debates to be had about that. As you know, a lot of these sorts of debates about religiosity, you can also, particularly in a Western, and obviously you need to always then say this isn't necessarily true everywhere, but in kind of Western Europe particularly, you can say secularization kind of pushes a lot of them out of, because we're talking about a minority of people who are religious in Western Europe.
With social class I always think about the different type of religious organizations and think about who might join those type of religious organizations and then why might they join them. So for example, new age movements are more likely to be middle class women who join new age movements, and it's about personal fulfillment, and also sort of like having the resources to be able to afford to take part in new age movements. Likewise, cults tends to be more middle class ownership because they are looking for they are seen in a way as being aspirational, helping them to make networks. Likewise, Protestantism tends to be seen more as middle class, whereas Catholicism would be seen as being more working class. Again, linking to the point that Duncan was talking about theodicies of disprivilege. Sects, you've got Wilson talking about marginalized groups are more likely to join sects, so it tends to be low working classes. However, I also found in the 1960s it often used to be younger middle class educated people who would go off and join some sects as a form of rebellion against the system.
Just on that Catholicism one, I mean, another factor that comes into that, because in the UK, is that Catholicism is often associated with either established migrant communities like Irish immigrants or more modern immigrant communities from Eastern Europe, whereas Church of England is this sort of the established church. We used to call it the Conservative Party at prayer. And in other countries, obviously, Catholicism is the established church, and so you get a different sort of different social thing in, say, France or Italy or something. There's I just wanted to quickly say that there were a couple of just on, and we'll finish with these two, I think. How much time is recommended per question?
I would minute and a half a mark, I would say. So
I mean, that's what you've got. That's what you've got, isn't it? Pretty much. Yeah.
That's what you've got. I would say 15 minutes. I've frozen. Have I? Yeah.
I can hear you.
15 minutes for your 10 markers, 30 minutes for your 20s.
Yeah, there or thereabouts. Yeah.
Roughly.
Yeah. And remember, you know, there's a lot to be said for just going through in order, but you don't have to, as long as you carefully label make it very clear which question you're answering. You could, do them in any order. What are some top exam tips to get full marks in this paper, or let's say higher marks in this paper? A big thing I would say, one is a couple of things that you notice. One is a lot of people running out of time for the second 20 marker, which is why I mentioned about the order that you could answer them and why the timings are important. A lot of people end up running out of time on the second 20 marker, and obviously that's quite a big chunk of the overall marks. And the other thing is just not to be thrown by that first 10 marker, the outline and explain, whether it's families or beliefs or whichever other topic you might be doing. That's the one where you look at it and think, oh, I don't think I've been taught this, because it's how this one thing impacts on another, and they might not be things you've learned. You know, expect that question to be a little bit, oh, that's a bit unusual, and be ready to go for it, and just think, oh, I know how to do this. It's all about making the link. It's all about making the connection and explaining how the one thing links to the other. Yeah,
it's making
the other
sure
10
you've
marker.
got
It's what you're used to. Yeah. The other 10 markers, same gig as paper 1 and paper 3. Just go for it.
Yeah, it's making sure you get both parts of that first 10 marker. And the other thing I would say about the 20 markers is go beyond the item. You might see in the item 2 or 3 things that kind of look like, oh, that could be good. You use that. Bring in something else as well, because if you just stick to what's in the item, it's kind of you're not going to get the range. Yeah. So bring in something else.
By the way, a couple of people
evaluate.
Do evaluate in your 20 markers and try and make your evaluation nice and explicit. Evaluate the point that you've made. Yeah. And answer the question that you've been asked. I know those are obvious things, but make sure you're addressing the question. A couple of people saying, are you saying do the 20 markers first? I'm not saying do that. Do what works well for you. I'm just saying that isn't that. Yeah, that there's you're allowed to. But do remember this one. You're not kind of writing in spaces, if you kind of see what I mean. It's a bit different from paper 1 and paper 3 where you've got the gaps. You are just filling in an answer box, so you need to be really very carefully label the right question number, whatever order you do. But yes, in theory you can do it in a random order if you want to. And then do we not evaluate for the first 10 markers? So for the outline and explain, there's nothing in the mark scheme for evaluation. When you do look at the I don't know what a super sticker is, Jesse, but thank you very much. Whatever it is, there's obviously elements of YouTube that I'm unfamiliar with, but thank you. Yeah, with the first one, there's no marks in the mark scheme for evaluation for the outline and explain. But when you look at the top band for analysis, it does mention one of the examples of analysis could be like the extent to which. So that kind of thing, like say we're saying, why secularization has led to maybe the impact that secularization has had on age and religion, which we were talking about before. You don't want to say it hasn't had an impact because that's not answering the question. But you could say, well, it's had this impact, but maybe more in this community than this other one, or more for this group than another, and that's not like a counter argument. That could be credited as some analysis. Okay, is that? Do we think we've covered most things there?
I think so. Yeah, I think there's. I can't see any more questions. People are asking about the stream the night before. We cover pretty much what we try to cover. What are the most popular questions? I don't know how YouTube things work. Whether you can put questions in before on that stream. I don't know. I don't think you can only put the comments on. I know you can only put comments on afterwards, can't you?
If the live chat's available, you can. I don't know when that becomes available. When we go on those, normally there's already some chat before we start, isn't there? But it might be from it might only be from like a few minutes before. I don't know. But yeah, feel free to pop questions on from a little while before. That's right. Evaluation is for the second 10 mark of the apply and
logic is, but you can put questions on before. It just needs to be scheduled beforehand.
Okay, well it's there then. Well, no, the night before one isn't there yet, but it will be a few days before, so don't worry, it will be there. So have a look as it's coming up. Okay, thanks very much, guys, and thank you very much, Craig.
No problem.
Loads of really good answers there. I know lots of people saying they don't like this topic or they don't like this paper and they're worried about it, but you've shown lots of really good knowledge, so do just keep going, and just the worst. What do you think? What's the worst thing is a question that you think, oh, I don't like that question, but they're asking you if you do know it. So just if you're like thrown a bit by the question, just take a moment, step back, and think, well, actually, what do I know that helps me answer this question? And you know plenty, so you will be able to do it. Don't be thrown by it. Okay, thank you very much.
No problem.
And you have a lovely evening as well, Spherically Art. Okay, thank you. Cheers, guys. Bye bye.
Bye.